The NFL concussion protocol. Last episode, we talked about what they do on the sideline survey. This episode, we're going to dig into how they get to come back. I'm Shane from Mind Matters, Navigating Head Injuries and Concussions. I'm here today with Thomas, one of the attorneys at the Concussion and Brain Injury Group here at Shane Smith Law. And this is the Mind Matters protocol. This is part 2 of our NFL concussion protocol series, where we talk about once the player's been diagnosed with a concussion, taken off the field, taken in the locker room, basically sent back to the hospital for treatment, how they get back to playing, which is what everybody cares about the most. Thomas, so let's briefly, sideline survey. What gets covered in that?
Got thematics questions, quick questions to see if the player's oriented to where they are, who they're playing, what the score is, and neurological exam for the sideline survey, all of this inside the blue tent.
All right, now after they leave the blue tent, they're thumbs down, they're showing some kind of symptoms of it. Next is the locker room SCAT survey. So what is that?
That is basically a more thorough neurological evaluation, just different testing as to whether their cognition is there, whether they have a sense of orientation to where they are. There's a neurocognitive assessment, neurological evaluation, and basically balance testing, seeing where they're at in terms of those different factors after they've been screened on that sideline.
All right, and that can be a thumbs up or thumbs down. If it's thumbs up, I could get back out to the field to play this game. They say, all right, you're good. Thumbs down, I'm out and on my way to the hospital, I assume.
Right, yeah, you're out of the game, and then you're placed into, it's all called, when you see it on TV, they call everything the concussion protocol. But the NFL has a more formal name for the process where you get back onto the field, and that's, hey, you've been yanked from the game, had signs and symptoms of a concussion, and to get back on the field, you have the return to participation protocol. So you don't go back into the game until you walk through this protocol.
All right, what does that look like? What's step 1?
All right, yeah, let's use Josh Allen, Buffalo Bills quarterback, as an example for this to start off with. They may or may not be eliminated by the time this podcast airs, but he's a useful case study. And so anybody who knows Josh Allen, let's assume he's scrambling, big boy, 240 pounds, breaks the pocket, barrels ahead for a first down, and does the wise thing for once in his career, decides to slide. Not a fake slide like he tried to pull against the Steelers in the wild card round, but a real legit.
Clearly, slide. Thomas, you didn't watch that game or have any feelings about it.
But none at all.
So, all right, he gets hit, bam, sideline survey, thumbs down, go back to the locker room, thumbs down. Nope, you're out of the game. How's he return? How's he get?
Yeah, so assuming they make it on to the next round, they pull off a miraculous win with the backup quarterback and get to the Super Bowl. He's been diagnosed with concussion. How does he get back on the field? There's a 5-step process where he has to be cleared to fully practice or play after concussion diagnosis. And this process, a return to participation protocol, it's a process the NFL has come up with, and it's based on what they call, and that's their characterization. I don't want to, defend the NFL and all of this. These are internationally accepted guidelines to ensure that each player receives consistent treatment.
And the Players League also had some weigh-in on when they were setting all this up, right?
Yeah, they definitely got to have a voice in all of it through the collective bargaining agreement and have some input into it. Yeah, so they definitely had some say.
It makes me think about one of those things where when I'm making rules, I'm like, this is what we should all do for everybody. And then it happens to me, I'm like, well, that's a stupid rule. I want to get back out there with that. I don't want to jump through all these hoops anymore, but now they're stuck. Yeah, stuck with it for their own good, basically, right?
Basically, yeah. So the first part of all this is phase 1. And,
all right.
And this is symptom-limited activity. So here in our example, Josh Allen, he'd be prescribed rest, limiting, or if necessary, avoiding activities. Then that's both physical or cognitive, which would increase or aggravate the symptoms.
All right, so I'm just resting and not doing anything that's going to make any of my symptoms worse.
Right, and this would just include, activities of daily living, and under athletic training staff supervision only, there would be or could be limited stretching, balance training that can be introduced, which would eventually progress to light aerobic exercise. And all of these only as, Josh Allen would be able to tolerate them. In phase 1, if any additional medical issues popped up, the Buffalo Bills team doctor, they should consider external consultation or additional diagnostics. So in phase 1, if there's no increase in symptoms, and Josh doesn't develop signs of concussion on the neurological exam, he could be cleared on to the next phase.
And how long, is there a certain timeline most of these phases have to take place or do take place, or is it just all up to the individual how quickly they heal?
Yeah, it's all up to the individual and how quickly they heal. And, a lot of times they're trying to see if someone can progress, through the phases in the course of a week. That's kind of the goal. It's like, hey, I want to get you back on the field. They want to get back on the field. They want to play. So a lot of times you'll see, guys be able to clear the protocol in a week. Sometimes if it's a worse type of injury, you'll see, a couple weeks, maybe even 3 or 4 weeks. Last year, Tua Tagovailoa, basically, they pulled him out for the season, or he pulled himself out for the season. They thought it just wasn't a good idea for him to be in there taking those types of hits.
So he couldn't complete the return to game protocol, basically.
Right. It was, it was pretty concerning. He had back-to-back concussions. I don't know that it was back-to-back weeks, but it was in pretty close frequency and time.
And as we've discussed in prior episodes, once you have one concussion, if you have another one, it's that much worse. It's not like you're starting from ground zero. It's just the symptoms are going to be magnified more.
Yeah, you can have a compounding effect. And, like in the 90s, Steve Young, his career was largely cut short due to, having a few too many concussions. I think he could have played a couple more years, but he had a few too many hard hits and decided it was best for him and his family if he walked away from the game.
All right, so round 1 is over. What's round 2?
Phase 2 is aerobic exercise. So here, it's Josh Allen again. He would be getting graduated cardiovascular exercise, and that would be under the direct oversight of the Bills medical staff. And this might be something like a Peloton, a exercise bike, treadmill. You would see him engaging in dynamic stretching and balance training, and this would involve a gradual increase in the duration and intensity of all these activities, as long as there's no increase or aggravation of signs or symptoms by the player while he's performing the activity, and not only while he's performing it, for a reasonable period afterward.
Okay, so if I go run for 30 minutes or do the Peloton for 30 minutes, they're going to watch. So it's legitimately, they're going to watch me and make sure I don't relapse, basically.
Right, yeah, they're watching you for your own good in a way. It's like, he says he's good, but let's just keep an eye on him, see if he's squinting from light sensitivity, and then, they're checking back with you later on. You go home, you're eating some, you're having a protein shake and you're getting a splitting headache, that would say, hey, maybe it's not time to continue progressing here.
I need to hang out here at phase 2 or you can go back to phase 1.
Right, yeah.
Because you can go up and down in the phases, right? If symptoms come up, they could pull you back and say you aren't ready to go to phase 2.
I don't know if you go back to phase 1. I don't think I've seen that, but I've definitely seen someone linger in a phase for a while where they say, hey, he's not ready to progress to the next phase, so he's going to stay here for a little while.
I'll leave you there.
I haven't seen him go up and down on it. It's not to say it can't happen, but I haven't.
Usually the advice is we're just going to hold you here for a little while.
Yeah, we'll keep you here. We'll stop these activities. We'll still let you attend, regular team meetings, engage in film study. But as long as there's not an increase or aggravation of signs or symptoms while they're engaged in cardiovascular activity, players basically ready to move on to the next phase.
All right, what's phase 3?
Phase 3 is football-specific exercise. And in this instance, Josh would continue with supervised cardiovascular exercises that are increased, and they might mimic sport-specific activities. And also, supervised strength training is introduced here. Josh Allen, in this instance, would also be allowed to practice with the rest of the Bills in sports-specific exercise for 30 minutes or less, and that's with careful and ongoing monitoring.
Okay, so I figure they're watching him like a hawk, didn't it? 30 minutes.
Yeah, and there's some discretion in between in phase 2 and phase 3 for neurocognitive testing to be administered. This is where you're going back and you're testing to see if the players kind of return to baseline and seeing where they're at. And if the player hasn't returned to kind of baseline in this instance and this testing in phase 2 or 3, you would repeat that test again in 48 hours. So that's why you hear sometimes, oh, he's still in phase 2, he's still in phase 3. It's because they're testing to get the baseline, but something's still off. There's still some sort of sign or symptom or neurocognitive ability that's just not back to where
catching up
baseline. But you could also look at it too, if they find that there's a non-concussion related cause, that's determined to be the cause, then that can be considered.
And we'll move them over, or let them keep progressing because this is causing the issue.
Right, maybe there's a headache or something for some other reason.
Or they have balance issues, but they also have a twisted ankle.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think that's a perfect example. In these instances here, it's the Bills team doctor who ultimately makes the decision on when the player gets to return to contact activities.
What phase is contact?
In phase 3, when there's a demonstrated ability for Josh Allen to do cardio and supervised strength training without an increase or aggravation of signs or symptoms, he can move on to the next phase.
And what's phase 4?
Phase 4 is club-based, non-contact training drills. So here, Josh Allen, after his concussion, he's going to continue cardiovascular, strength, balance training, team-based sports-specific exercise, and participation in non-contact football activities, which would include throwing, catching, running, or other position-specific activities.
So what's the difference in phase 3 and phase 4? Is supervised strength training and sports-specific exercises, is that right?
Yeah, sports-specific exercises, but not necessarily training drills. So one of the examples, you could, maybe having players running routes and, Allen's throwing, a corner route to them or in-cutting routes, different things like that, but not anything where he's going to be, of course he's not going to be tackling anyway, but, there's no hitting, there's no players allowed to hit him. He's wearing the red jersey. There's no tackling, there's no running through tackling dummies like, you see, run through, hold the ball, run through, with the tackling dummy, the gauntlet, or pushing a sled or anything like that. It's just kind of a slow and gradual increase in what you're able to do. So maybe a sport-specific activity and doing some running or running with the ball, but then you're moving on. It's just a slow, gradual increase.
Ramp up.
What you're
All right, so phase 4 is non-contact team drills and stuff, right?
Yeah, non-contact football-specific activities. And here what they're looking at too is you have to have all signs, symptoms, and a neurological examination, including neurocognitive testing and balance testing. All these have to return to baseline status before you can return to full football activity and clearance.
Is that phase 5?
That is phase 5. There is one exception, or just kind of an exception here to phase 4, and these are ones that can happen on a case-by-case basis because you have some players who have documented ADHD or learning disabilities.
Right.
And, for something like that, if, hey, you're showing you're not remembering much, or
you may not have remembered things much anyway, right? So that's why that baseline is so critical, and that's, I guess, why they lean on the team doctor. The team doctor should know these things, right?
Well, yeah, he should know his patients. He should know those who are under his care. So he's ultimately the one who can make that determination. With the neurocognitive testing and the balance testing at baseline, these have to be completed no later than the end of phase 4 with the results interpreted as back to baseline.
All right, so hit phase 4. Everybody says I'm back to baseline. What's phase 5?
Yeah, that's full football activity or clearance.
All right, so I'm good to go. Once I finish 4, phase 5 is basically I'm living like back to what I did before.
Yeah, there's kind of a final component to that, though, is, you've been cleared to move on to phase 5. You've established your ability to participate in non-contact football activity, which will include team meetings, conditioning, you got the cardio, non-contact practice. This is all without recurring signs and symptoms, and your neurocog testing is back to normal. But here, the club doctor would clear Josh Allen for full football activity involving contact, and then he would be examined by the independent neurological consultant that's assigned to the Bills. So this is somebody who's kind of, separate from the Bills, organization. And in these instances, the team doctor, he has to give that INC, the independent neurological consultant, has to give him a copy of all relevant reports and tests, which would include the sideline and booth reports, the booth athletic trainer spotter report where they initially see it, team injury report, that's to give a daily update on what the injury is, and also be given access to video of the injury where that's applicable, where there's actual angle of it. And they also get the player's neurocognitive test results and interpretation. So if independent neurological consultant concurs with the Bills team doctor that the player's concussion has resolved, then in this instance, Josh Allen could play in the Super Bowl.
Then he's cleared, phase 5 is over, and now I'm back to normal.
Back to normal. And, hopefully this is just hypothetical example. Nobody gets hurt, and hopefully the Bills lose to the Chiefs.
So, one question, that independent neurologist at the end we were talking about that's going to give me the thumbs up or thumbs down and get out of phase 5. Is that likely to be the same independent neurologist we had at the game that said, hey, I think I see something here? It would seem to me they're probably different people because I might be in an away game, so that neurologist is not going to be the team neurologist. It's going to be somebody else.
Yeah, it is a different one. It's actually, you have an ink and an unk.
Oh, really? Okay.
In terms of acronyms, and I'm not quite sure of the difference between them. The first one is the one that's in the booth, the unaffiliated neurological consultant.
Okay.
And then you have an independent neurological consultant who's assigned to.
So it's going to be a different person.
And he would have access to the unaffiliated.
Gotcha.
And I think the unaffiliated part goes in, hey, this is one unaffiliated neurological consultant for both teams who's watching the game.
Okay.
So he's not affiliated with the Bills or the Chiefs. He's affiliated with that game. But then when you bring it down more to a micro level, each team has their own independent neurological consultant who's tied to and assigned.
So he's independent, meaning he's not a team employee, but he's probably a neurologist who works with this team.
Or with the NFL, or is a local, affiliated with some hospital guy who comes on the weekends and has a, another gig, in addition to his hospital duties.
And I think it's great to know what's going on behind the scenes. I know I wonder when I see it sometimes, like, hey, what is going on? So I'm glad we could dig into this. How effective do we think these protocols are in protecting players? Obviously, they're all fairly newish, but how do we think they're doing so far?
Yeah, I think they're a significant step in the right direction. They're putting measures into place that are protecting player safety. Of course, as we discover and learn more about the brain, like we're always talking about, there's learning more every day. There's going to be room for improvement, different ways of testing these things, especially as we learn about concussions and their long-term effects and ways they might present themselves, or different diagnostics that may be available on the field.
I was going to say, it makes me think of Star Trek when they run that thing over you and it tells you everything that's injured. I can see that at some point, that'll be the tension, right? Boom.
Yeah.
But until then, we're working, hope to God, I can't imagine every team would have, say, an MRI or something, right on the side. That sounds crazy.
Yeah.
From a legal perspective, how do these protocols impact like personal injury cases related to sports concussions?
Yeah, I think you can look at these protocols and see them as a standard of care in the sports context. So if the team or the league fails to follow these protocols, it could potentially lead to liability for injuries sustained by the player, or long-term consequences like we've seen in some of the lawsuits that have been brought against the NFL.
I have enjoyed us digging into part 2 of the NFL concussion protocol. I think the NFL is probably in the forefront of this area because of all the lawsuits that used to happen, but I think we'll see something similar in other sports, I guess, especially other contact sports as it moves along. And maybe dig into those on some of our other episodes, or dig into the trickle-down effect of, now that the NFL is doing this, how does it impact our college games and our high school games and other sports or football games?
Yeah.
I guess if you've enjoyed this episode of Mind Matters, hit like and subscribe down below and hit the bell for notifications. Catch future episodes where we discuss, concussions and everything related to TBIs and brain injuries and concussions. And everybody remember, if you're in pain, call Shane, 980-999-9999.
In pain, so I call Shane, 980-999-9999. In pain, call Shane.